Once upon a time, in a beautiful village in eastern Africa called Umudimpa, there lived a young beautiful woman named Febechi. She was strikingly beautiful, with long graceful legs and slim figure that drew the admiration of every man in the village. People often said she was a gift from the goddess themselves. The king of Umudimpa, King Agolo, was known far and wide for his immense wealth and many wives. He had just taken his sixth wife when he first laid eyes on Febechi. The sight of her made his heart race and his body trembled with desire. Her short maiden wrapper revealed her long alluring legs, and in the moment, he decided he wanted her to be his, no matter the cost. Though he tried to look away, he couldn't erase the image from his mind. 2 months later, he sent his chiefs to Febechi's house to ask for her hand in marriage. Her parents were thrilled at the proposal, believing that their union with royalty would elevate their family status. But Febechi refused. "I will never marry that old man who doesn't know his mate," she said firmly. "He already has 6 wives and countless concubines. What does he want from me?" Her mother sighed. "You know what he wants, my daughter. You are beautiful. Haven't you noticed how many men come here every day just to ask for your hand in marriage?" "Mother, tell the chief that I, Febechi, refuse to marry the king," she replied, turning away. Her parents exchanged worried glances but did not argue. They remembered the prophecy an old woman had once told them, that they must never force Febechi to do anything against her will. Even as a child, Febechi had been different, wise beyond her years, speaking and acting with the maturity of an adult. Every part of the prophecy had come true except one, that after Febechi's 20th birthday, her mother would conceive of triplets. And Febechi's 20th birthday was only a few months away. When the chiefs heard her parents' decision, their faces turned pale. They knew their king. He never took no for an answer. Despite their plea, Febechi's parents stood firm. When the news reached King Agolo, he was furious. He paced his chamber shouting, "How dare she reject me, the most desired man in all the kingdom? I am rich, powerful and strong. What more could she want?" No one dare respond. "I will show her that no one rejects the king," he roared. That very day, he mounted his horse and rode to Febechi's family compound with 2 guards. He found her outside peeling cassava. Without hesitation, he ordered his guards to seize her. Her parents watched helplessly as their daughter was taken away. They knew that defying the king would bring punishment upon the family, and it wouldn't change anything. At the palace, Febechi was handed over to the royal maidens, who bathed and dressed her up. She wept the entire time, feeling powerless and broken. That night, King Agulu took her, leaving her shattered and empty inside. From that night on, he visited her every evening, which fueled jealousy and hatred among the other wives. They would turn away or spit on the ground whenever she passed. Febechi grew lonelier by the day. Her parents were forbidden from seeing her, and every attempt she made to escape failed. Eventually, she discovered she was pregnant. The news only deepened her despair. She refused to eat or drink, disgusted at the thought of bringing a child into a palace filled with hate and fathered by a man who had destroyed her spirit. When the royal midwife noticed how frail Febechi had become, she warned the king that the pregnancy was delicate and that he must not go near her until she had given birth. From that moment, Febechi finally found small measure of peace. Though plagued by nausea and back pains, she slept soundly for the first time in months. The king stayed away, and with the help of an old woman who cared for her, she grew stronger. Her beauty, even in pregnancy, shone brighter than ever. As her due date grew near, Febechi's thoughts often drifted to her parents, whom she still longed to see. Febechi often wondered how she could please her husband enough for him to let her visit her parents, or at least allow them to see her, even for a short while. Then, very early one morning, a piercing scream shattered the silence of the palace. The maidens rushed towards the sound and found it coming from Febechi's room. They quickly informed the king, who sent for the midwives. Mama Buchi and Mama Nnamdi were the two midwives assigned to care for Febechi. Her cries echoed through the palace as waves of pain tore through her. Meanwhile, Golibe, the fifth wife, strolled around the palace as though nothing were happening. She ordered the cook to prepare her gold pepper soup and agidi and told the guards to fetch her fresh palm wine. It was almost as if she were celebrating. Some of the maidens who pitied Febechi exchanged uneasy glances. They knew she never wanted to be there. Golibe, however, was pompous, arrogant, and cruel. Days passed. 3 days turned into 4, and Febechi was still in labor. She had lost much blood and strength. She screamed, cursed, and wept, calling upon the gods to punish the king who had brought her this pain. On the 5th day, a frail baby girl was finally born. The midwives quickly wrapped the child and placed her close to her mother. Febechi's eyelid fluttered as exhaustion consumed her. "Please, Febechi, stay awake for your baby," the midwife pleaded through tears. But Febechi managed only a faint smile before drawing her last breath. The midwife sobbed bitterly. They had witnessed the suffering this young woman endured. When King Agulu was told, his fury knew no bounds. "You evil child," he bellowed at the newborn. "Not only did you cause your mother pain for days, you took her life. From this day forward, you shall know only pain." He ordered his guards to take Febechi's body back to her father's compound. Because she had not been formally married as tradition demanded, he could not bury her in the royal grounds. Whispers spread quietly across the village. "What a wicked man," one woman murmured. "His death will be more painful than hers," another replied. No one dare speak aloud, lest they lose their head before finishing their words. Febechi's parents were devastated. They had not seen their daughter in months, and now her lifeless body lay before them. They buried her quietly, tears soaking the earth. The baby Febechi left behind was named Iwe, meaning pain, a name the king himself had chosen. He left her in the care of one of the midwives, but forbade her grandparents from visiting. Time passed, and Iwe grew to resemble her mother in every way. Her beauty, her radiance, her spirit as gentle. Yet, like her mother, her beauty came with sorrow. At 10 years old, she was brought to live in the palace, not as a princess, but as a servant. She did every chore assigned to her and obeyed everyone's command. She walked like a beast of burden. Her small hands were rough, her body always sore. She cried at night, wishing for love, but none came. Even the slightest mistake earned her a beating. A few months after Iwe turned 15, the kingdom fell into a terrible famine. King Agulu, greedy as ever, borrowed heavily from neighboring kingdoms, promising to pay them within a few years. When the gold came, he divided it into 10 parts, spending only 2 parts on the famine relief project and keeping the rest for himself. But things did not improve. People began leaving the kingdom, murmuring that they had been cursed. Years later, the other kingdoms demanded repayment, but Agulu scoffed. "What can they do to me? They are as weak as dead rats," he boasted. When King Uche of the neighboring realm heard this, he was enraged. News had reached him that while Umudimpa starved, its king lived in luxury. He sent a message to Agulu, "I am coming for what you owe me." Knowing Uche's reputation, Agulu panicked. That very night, he gathered his gold, treasures, and coins and fled the kingdom under the cover of the night. By morning, word spread that King Uche and his army had reached the borders. When the royal household realized their king had deserted them, they too fled, wives, guards, and even the maids. The palace and village became eerily quiet. When King Uche entered Umudimpa, it was as quiet as a graveyard. "Coward!" he roared, dismounting his horse. He traced every room in the palace until he heard a faint whimper. Tracing the sound, he found Iwe, tied up, covered in wounds and barely breathing. "Take her," he said coldly. "She will be our scapegoat." They untied her and dragged her away. She walked for hours until her legs trembled and gave out. Her captors ignored her cries. To them, she was just a prisoner. When they reached the kingdom of Ezoba, she was thrown into a dungeon. She was given just enough food and water to survive, and she ate greedily, more than she had ever eaten before, except on festival days. The days that followed were strangely peaceful. She was fed 3 times a day, allowed to bathe every 2 days. Iwe didn't even mind the loneliness. She had never known companionship. Still, fear lingered. Why are they treating me kindly? She wondered. Are they planning to kill me or sacrifice me to their gods? But deep inside, she no longer feared death. She had never known her mother, only the stories the midwife had told her, and her father. He despised her from the very moment she drew breath. It had been a little over 2 weeks since Iwe arrived in King Uche's palace. One morning, she was summoned into the grand throne room. The air was heavy with silence, filled with elders seated on both sides, and at the far end sat King Uche. Tall and regal, his presence alone commanded reverence. His aura felt powerful and deeply magnetic. As Iwe entered, she immediately bowed her head and knelt, just as she had always done in her former kingdom. The king's gaze rested on her longer than intended, his expression unreadable but curious. "What is your name?" His deep voice echoed across the room. "Iwe, my king," she replied softly. A murmur swept through the elders. "I said, what is your name?" he repeated, his voice calm but firm. "Iwe, my king," she answered again, her head still bowed. "Who gives a child a name that means pain?" he asked, his brow knitting in wonder. "Who are you, and why were you tied in the dungeon?" Tears filled her eyes as she tried to speak. "I am nobody, my king. I was tied there because I added scent leaves into my queen's pepper soup instead of uziza leaves." Her voice cracked as the painful memory surfaced. The king's eyes softened. "And for that they tied you like a thief?" She nodded slowly. "Stand up," he said, his tone gentler now, "and look at me." When she lifted her head, her eyes met his, and in that instant, the entire room seemed to fall silent. Her face, though weary and marked with tears, was breathtaking. Her skin glowed with a warm bronze hue. King Uche's chest tightened. How could anyone call pain something so beautiful? She had gained some weight since her arrival, her cheeks a little fuller, her once frail body showing the faintest sign of health returning. It made him wonder what kind of suffering she must have endured in her previous kingdom. "Your new name will be Chiamaka," he said, finally, "because truly, God is beautiful, and so are you." He whispered the last part to himself. The elders nodded in agreement. "Thank you, my king," she whispered. "Never answer to that name again," he said firmly, before signaling his guard. The guard approached, and with a few whispered instructions, he escorted her away. She was taken to a radiant young woman, Princess Chimamanda, whose smile eased her fears. The princess bathed her, dressed her in a soft linen cloth, and assigned her a cozy room within her wing of the palace. Chiamaka spent her days walking through the palace gardens or helping the village with the princess. Yet, despite the kindness around her, she often kept to herself. Trust did not come easily to her, not after all she had seen. King Uche often found himself gazing at her from afar, sometimes through the window when she strolled in the garden, other times when she laughed softly with Chimamanda. There was something about her that pulled at him. Her grace, the gentle sway of her steps, and the quiet sadness that lingered in her eyes. Even without jewels or fine clothing, she carried herself like a queen born of light. Her beauty was not boastful, it was humble and radiant. Uche would sometimes ask his sister about her. Chimamanda pitied the girl deeply. She still flinches when people speak too loudly, she once told him. He said nothing, but his thoughts lingered on her long after the conversation ended. One sunny afternoon, Chiamaka noticed a little girl crying at the edge of the village. She knelt beside her and smiled gently. "Why are you crying, my dear?" The girl sniffed. "My friends don't want to play with me because of my sickness." Chiamaka's heart softened. "I'm sorry about your friends, but if you have me, I would love to be your friend and play with you." "Really? You don't mind my sickness?" the girl asked in disbelief. Chiamaka shook her head with a warm smile. "Not at all." They played in the sand, and Chiamaka sang and danced, making the girl laugh again. Soon, the girl's mother stepped out and watched them with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "Ngozi had been down lately. You have brought her joy again." "It's okay, Mama," Chiamaka replied with a smile. "I'm happy to have Ngozi as my friend." Every day after that, Chiamaka visited Ngozi, sometimes bringing her to the palace. King Uche noticed the change in her, the light that had returned to her smile, and he couldn't help but be intrigued. He would find himself staring at her more often, watching the way her laughter made her eyes glisten. She had carved a quiet space in his heart, though he refused to admit it even to himself. As usual, Chiamaka went to visit Ngozi at her house, expecting to be greeted by her laughter that always warmed her heart, but instead she was met with loud, heart-wrenching cries. "Ngozi," she called softly, but no little feet came running. One of the women from the compound turned to her with tear-streaked face. "My child," she said in a broken voice, "Ngozi's sickness worsened last night. She didn't make it. She would be buried before nightfall." The words struck Chiamaka like thunder. The world around her blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. She felt her knees gave way beneath her as she sank to the ground, weeping uncontrollably. Ngozi, the little Ngozi who had made her laugh, who had reminded her that life could still hold kindness, was gone. She stayed for the funeral, her heart breaking with every cry and every shovel of earth. When it was over, she lingered beside a small grave, long after everyone had gone home, whispering prayers. That night, she returned to the palace quietly. Inside her room, she reached for the small carved wooden door Ngozi had once given her, the one she said would keep them friends forever. Chiamaka pressed it to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She tied the door around her neck like a necklace, as if holding onto her only remaining piece of joy. Then she picked the rope. Her mind was heavy, her heart shattered. She slipped out of the palace and began to walk towards the dark village path, the one no one dare follow at night because of wild animals said to roam there. But Chiamaka didn't care. Each step felt like she was leaving behind a world that had only ever hurt her. When she reached a lonely tree, she fell to her knees beneath it and cried until her voice broke. "Ngozi, why?" she whispered. "Why did you leave me too?" She raised the rope and placed it around her neck, her trembling fingers ready to tie it, when suddenly a pair of strong arms wrapped around her from behind. That night, King Uche could not sleep. From his window, he noticed a faint movement in the path leading to the forest. His pulse quickened when he recognized her, Chiamaka, walking barefoot towards the woods, her head bowed, her hands clutching something. He didn't think twice. Grabbing his cloak, he followed her quietly through the darkness until he saw her stop beneath a large tree. The moonlight fell on her face, and he froze, her tears streaming like silver, and though her eyes were swollen from crying, her beauty still pierced him like an arrow, and her trembling hands held a rope. She was whispering something, words of grief and surrender. Before she could lift the rope, Uche rushed forward and wrapped his arms around her. "My king, please, let me go," she sobbed. "I am tired." He looked down at her tear-stained face. "Not while I breathe," he whispered, holding her tighter. When she finally fell limp in exhaustion, he lifted her into his arms and carried her back to the palace, never looking away from her face. Under the moonlight, she looked impossibly beautiful. That night, he sat beside her, his gaze fixed on her as she slept. When she awoke hours later, startled to find him beside her, she gasped, "My king, I'm sorry, I'll leave immediately." "Stay," he said simply. She froze. "Huh?" "I said stay." She sat still, her eyes wild. "Tell me," he said softly, "why were you going to do that to yourself?" And Chiamaka poured her heart out. The pain, the loneliness, the memories of cruelty and loss. Uche listened in silence, his heart twisting with every word. "Why are you awake at this hour, my king?" she asked shyly when she was done. "I can't sleep," he replied with a faint smile. "I haven't been able to sleep well for years." She nodded quietly. "Never do that again," he said, taking her hands gently. "It's not worth it. You are still strong, still beautiful. You haven't even seen half of what life can offer." Her eyes glistened again, but this time with something like hope. From that night on, something changed between them. They began to talk often, to share laughter and quiet moments. She brewed him herbal teas that finally eased his sleeplessness. Before long, they both realized what their hearts already knew. They were in love. Their bond deepened until one evening, under the soft glow of moon, he confessed his feelings. To his surprise, she smiled through tears and whispered, "I love you too, my king." They were soon married, and the kingdom rejoiced. King Uche never stopped staring at her with the same awe he had that first day in the throne room. She was his peace after years of unrest. Sometimes, King Uche and Chiamaka trained together in the palace courtyard. He had insisted she learn a few defense moves, not because he thought she was weak, but because he wanted her to always feel capable of protecting herself. Her grace, focus, and quiet strength during their training sessions often left him in awe. They had traveled to another kingdom for the annual King Summit, a grand gathering of rulers from across the lands. One warm afternoon, Chiamaka asked to visit the local market. Uche, ever protective, allowed her to go with a few guards. The market was alive with color and sounds, traders calling out prices and women laughing. Chiamaka smiled softly as she wandered among the stalls, her long braids swaying gently behind her. She was at peace until she heard that voice. "Febechi!" The sound froze her heart. She turned slowly, and there he was, King Agulu, aged but unmistakably. His once proud face had grown harder. She recognized him immediately. "Febechi," he whispered again, stepping closer. "You are back to me, my love. I have missed you." Chiamaka's breath hitched. The name, her mother's name, burned in her ears. He reached out, his hands trembling as though to touch her cheek. "Come to me," he said softly. "I know the gods will return you to me." But Chiamaka did not move. Her eyes were no longer the eyes of a frightened girl. Before he could react, Chiamaka pulled out the small pocket knife and defended herself as he lunged forward. King Agulu let out a brutal scream, clutching his arm. "Take this man to the palace," she commanded her guards. "Let him face judgment before the kings he once disrespected." When King Uche heard what had happened, he was both proud and protective. He made sure Chiamaka was nowhere near Agulu again. "Let the other king deal with that man," he said grimly. "His judgment is long overdue." That night, as the golden dusk settled over the kingdom, Uche stood quietly at the doorway of their chambers. Inside, Chiamaka was humming softly, slicing apples by the window. The light touched her face, making her skin glow. She turned briefly, her smile gentle and warm. That fateful encounter with Agulu, though born of darkness, had led him to the woman who healed him. And as he watched her laugh softly to herself, Uche thought, even pain can give birth to the most beautiful blessings. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. See you in our next one. Bye.